Hello. Welcome, everybody. Just give a minute here to let everyone get into the chat. But welcome to Homemade. My name is Nico Muratori. I'm joined today by our chef in the chat, Samantha.
Hello, excited to be here.
Today we're partnering with North Carolina Sweet Potatoes, and we're going to have an awesome dish for you today. We are making a sweet potato eggs Benedict. So think the classic brunch dish, but we are going to elevate it by making some really delicious sweet potato fritters. Sub that out instead of our English muffin. Going to be really excellent, and can't wait to take you through the recipe. It's super nutritious, got a lot of great fiber going on with those sweet potatoes, so a great way to start your day. We're also doing a giveaway today, and so North Carolina Sweet Potatoes is giving away a little gift bag here. And so in the chat today, give us your favorite sweet potato recipe that you've ever made, and we're going to choose a winner by the end of class. So we want to hear about all those awesome sweet potato recipes that you've made over the years. What are your favorites? Put them in the chat. We want to hear about them. Samantha's going to take a look at them, and we're going to pick a winner. Get a little goodie bag from our friends at North Carolina Sweet Potatoes. So today we have a couple different prep projects that we're going to do as we kind of get ready. But as I always like to start class, I like to go through an overview of what we have kind of on the station. And so anytime I'm cooking at home, especially if we're doing something that's going to happen pretty fast once the cooking occurs, I like to get everything ready ahead of time. And in professional cooking, we always call this mise en place, and that's a French term that means everything in its place. And so on my station here, I have everything in its place to get ready to do every part of the recipe today. So on my cutting board, we have all of our ingredients for making our sweet potato fritters. So we've got our sweet potato, some onion, and all the rest of the ingredients we're going to mix up in there. Got all that right here with my box grater where we're going to grate our sweet potatoes. We're also making a lovely hollandaise sauce today, which is going to go with the sweet potato Benedicts. And hollandaise is this wonderful egg yolk, butter, lemon juice sauce that's going to get drizzled right on top of these. And got some butter melting over here, and then we have our eggs right over here on the side, and we'll get that ready to go a little bit later. We're going to show you an awesome way to make hollandaise today. We're going to do it in a little blender or a little food processor. If you have one of these at home, it's a great way to make hollandaise without having to spend all that time whisking those yolks and worrying about breaking that sauce when you're pouring the butter into it and emulsifying it. After that, we're going to go and we're going to actually poach some eggs, and then we're going to make some poached spinach to go along with this dish, and we'll finish it all off by putting it all together. So here we go. We're going to dive right in. For our first step, we're going to be working on our sweet potato fritters. So as mentioned before, we have a beautiful North Carolina sweet potato, really delicious. This is a medium-sized one, about 8 ounces for what we're using today for this recipe. And then we have just a quarter of a white onion here, so it's a little small piece. And if you'll notice, I kept the root intact in the onion, and we'll discuss why in just a second. Other things we have set up is just a little bit of flour here. That's going to help bind it together. We have our egg that when it cooks is going to help it set when we make these little sweet potato fritters. Then we have some nice sage. We're going to chop that up and add that in there. Really lovely kind of combination of sweet potato, sage, and the onion. Really nice flavor profile. It's black pepper and salt. We're going to keep it super simple. So first step today, we're going to take that sweet potato and we're going to grate it on the large side of a box grater. And if you're not familiar with a box grater, you might have one in your drawer at home. Kind of a lovely mixed use device that we can grate on cheese, potatoes, whatever you might need it for. Lots of different sides on this one. We're going to use the large side, the coarse side. And I'm just going to put this in the bowl, and I'm going to do it on its side. And this is a really kind of easy way to start to grate the sweet potato, is because it's going to kind of sit nice and snug in the bowl. Before we do that, I'm just going to quickly take the peel right off the sweet potato. Just go around using that peeler to remove the majority of the skin. If there's little pieces on there, it's not the end of the world, but a little tough, and so we want to keep it nice and orange and take that skin off of our sweet potato today. So once we get our sweet potato peeled, next thing we're going to do is get onto the box grater and start grating. So I'm going to hold it from the top, and I'm going to use the this little cut side that I have here and just start grating that sweet potato. When you're using a box grater like this, sometimes with a harder vegetable like a sweet potato, it's hard to kind of go back and forth. So sometimes I'll go and I'll actually lift the sweet potato at the bottom of each slice. And this way, it's just kind of resetting every time, and a little bit of an easier way to grate the sweet potato than just kind of rubbing it back and forth. And as I accumulate sweet potato in my grater, what I'm going to do is just turn it on its side and kind of give it a quick whack into the bowl to make sure that we're emptying all the sweet potato into the bowl. I'm going to keep doing that same process, keep grating. Definitely requires a little bit of force. And once it gets a little bit smaller, then you can really start going a little bit faster and getting the grate going. One thing when you're working with the box grater like this, watch out for your fingers. If you get your fingers down here and accidentally kind of slice into them, box graters can be pretty sharp, and so what I recommend is keeping your hand almost cupped a little bit where your knuckles are down, just like this. And so this is a nice way to make sure that you're not getting your fingers too close to the actual blades here on the grater. And we'll do that same thing, just turn it upside just to get the sweet potato out of there, and then finish up. And at this point, because the sweet potato is getting smaller, I kind of rotate it from side to side, and then we'll try a little bit on this side just to make sure that we can grate the whole thing. Once it becomes this small, I'll actually take my palm and use that as the way that I'm gonna press up against the sweet potato, and this way we're able to grate the entire thing and not waste any of our product here. So, just almost done here.
And we have a question in the chat asking about what kind of sweet potato you use. Maybe you could show one of the ones whole.
Absolutely, yeah. Give me 1 second here. We've got a whole beautiful bowl of sweet potatoes here. Yeah, so these are our gorgeous North Carolina sweet potatoes. In season 12 months a year. Available at a market near you. All right, well, I made a little bit of a mess doing that, so we're just gonna clean up our station just a tiny bit here. And then we'll get into grating our onion. So we've got the sweet potato grated, and the next step is that we're going to grate our onion. And remember earlier when I talked about leaving the root intact on the onion? If you're not familiar with what that means, is when you have a whole onion, oftentimes one side of it has kind of these little hairs, little roots that come out of the bottom. When you remove those, the onion will kind of start to fall apart, right? If you've ever sliced onions at home before, once you cut the root out, nothing is really holding it intact anymore. And so the reason I like to keep that root in is because when we grate it, if I'm working with an onion that I have fully taken the root out of, it's gonna be really hard to hold and be kind of awkward. And so I keep that root side on the top. And what I'm gonna do is do that exact same process and just gently grate this onion from the top and just kind of slicing down towards that root. And if you notice, I'm keeping the, not the cut side, but the rounded side of the onion on the outside. And the reason being is that when it goes against the blades, it's adding pressure back onto the onion here. And so if I do it this way, the onion wants to start to fall apart that direction. So I always grate it with the rounded side kind of facing the grater. And this way it's really easy to grate that onion and have the whole piece stay intact in your hand. And once it gets smaller, just like the sweet potato, you can start grating a little bit more firm and getting the whole onion grated. We lost a little piece right there. See if we can just finish that up. Get it all grated. And that feels good. When you're working with the box grater, make sure you give it a good tap to get all of that onion out of there. You don't want to leave any of that delicious flavor behind. And so this way, we've got everything in our bowl. We can pass the box grater over to the sink. So the next step we're gonna show you here is a little trick where we wanna remove a little bit of moisture from these sweet potatoes. We wanna remove a little bit of all of that juice from the onions. And so what we're gonna do is just take a kitchen towel. You could do this with a strainer if you don't have a kitchen towel available. But what I'm gonna do is take all of the sweet potatoes and onions and I'm gonna get them right into the middle of my towel. And we are going to wrap these sweet potatoes up in here, kind of bring everything to a point on the top. And then as tightly as I can, I'm going to squeeze as much liquid and moisture out of the sweet potato and onion as possible. So check it out. See all that juice starting to come out? That is excess moisture that is just gonna make kind of a wet situation in our pan. And we wanna make something that's gonna be crispy and delicious. And so I'm just gonna keep squeezing these sweet potatoes here until we get a good amount of this moisture out of them. Both the onion and the sweet potato both contain ample moisture. And so doing this process with whether it's a strainer, paper towel, kitchen towel like this, good amount of liquid coming out of this. So give it some good hard squeezes. You can also take the towel and you can twist. And so if you're having trouble squeezing the water out, twist just like this. And then you'll notice that all the rest of that liquid comes out. And we've got a few tablespoons of liquid out of this. And so that's a pretty significant amount when we're considering, you know, how much this is gonna make at the end of the day, about 6 patties for the sweet potato fritters. And so removing this liquid is a pretty essential step in making these light, crispy, wonderful sweet potato fritters. So I'm gonna just put this over into the sink. And then we're gonna work with a new bowl here and transfer our sweet potatoes into our bowl, and we'll start mixing up these fritters. So now that we have removed all the moisture, we see this is like kind of a nice drier texture. And we're gonna add that right into the bowl. and start thinking about mixing the rest of our ingredients into there. Give ourselves a little wipe down of the station, and then we will start with our egg and sage. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take my lovely sage here, and we're going to do a little chiffonade. And if you've never heard of the term chiffonade before, it means to kind of slice thinly in one direction. And so what I'll do is I'll pick all of the leaves off of the sage first, and I'll start to pile them on top of each other in a kind of large to small order. This way we have the biggest leaf on the bottom and the smallest leaves on the top. And I'll stack them all up, and I'm going to give them just a little roll using that biggest leaf to kind of help hold the outside right there. And then I'm just going to take my knife and we're just going to slice right through this. And this way, we get like a nice even slice on all of the sage. We're not bruising the herb too much. We're just going through and giving it a little chop. And that looks perfect. I'm just going to turn it one direction and just give it 2 or 3 slices through the other way just to make sure we break those sage pieces down. And there we go. Nice chopped sage. Let's add that into our bowl. Next up, we're going to season with some salt and pepper. In the recipe, you'll notice that we're going to season these twice. We'll season the mix right now, and then when we're cooking them in the pan, we're going to season them a little bit more again. Adding the salt in now is going to help really season the inside of this, and then as we cook them and they sear in the ghee, the clarified butter that we're going to use, it'll be really nice to just give it a little bit more salt at that point too. So seasoning in stages is always key, especially when you're cooking at home. When you're using salt, you want to be seasoning kind of from the beginning of your cooking all the way to the end, and this way you have the salt that's kind of all the way throughout the food as opposed to just on the surface, which when you eat something that only has surface salt, it really falls off the back of the palate and doesn't finish strong. And you want your food to, have a really delicious flavor kind of from the front to the back. And so seasoning in stages, seasoning as you go is key. So I'm going to just take a little bit of salt here, about a teaspoon, 2 little pinches, and we got our salt into our bowl. Next thing, a little bit of black pepper. And then we're going to make a little well in the middle of our sweet potato and onion, and we're going to crack an egg. 1 whole egg right in the middle. We also have our water going here for our spinach and our eggs. I'm just going to turn that down a little bit. We are boiling pretty hard. Just keep that on a low heat. Egg is in our bowl, ready to start mixing that up. Take a fork and start mixing up your egg. I like to get the yolk and the white mixed together first, kind of in the bottom of the bowl, and then I'll start folding the rest of all of this together. And then to bind this, because we have squeezed out all that juice, it does have, a little bit of a dry texture. We add the egg in there, and it helps moisten it up a little bit, helps start to combine all of it. And then we're going to add just a little bit of flour. So we'll take a tablespoon of flour. We're going to add this in here, and this is going to help work with the egg to bind these together and make sure that they don't fall apart when we go and cook them in the pan. At this point, I'm going to switch to using my hand. For the purposes of today, I'll throw a glove on, just so I don't have to wash my hands a million times and turn my back to you all. This way, I'll just be able to kind of massage this and mix it all up together. So I'm going to go in with my hand, start mixing the egg with the flour, the sweet potato, and getting it to a texture where we feel that we can make little patties out of this and then start to fry them in our pan in just a few minutes once we get everything else set up. So this is a really nice texture that we're looking for here. And the reason I can tell that I'm feeling good about the texture is that when I ball it up in my hand, I'm able to kind of flatten this out, and I feel like I can cook those in a pan just fine. If it feels very wet, if you're noticing that there's water pooling at the bottom of your bowl, if you didn't squeeze out quite as much moisture as I did, another teaspoon to a tablespoon of flour should help solve that problem. But I feel very good about these right now, so we're going to set these aside, and then we're going to start thinking about our next steps. Samantha, how are the sweet potato stories in the chat?
Oh, so many sweet potato ideas. You're missing out. Just being there.
Do you want to give me some of your favorites so far?
Oh, I saw a sweet potato millet fritter. I thought that sounded good.
That sounds fascinating.
Sweet potato parsnip mash, sometimes
Lovely.
with carrot. Loaded baked sweet potato sounds delicious. Whiskey glazed sweet potato.
Wow.
I thought that sounded pretty good.
You got some really creative ideas in there. I think it really speaks to the versatility of the sweet potato. They are such an amazing thing to have in the kitchen all of the time, all year round. We were just talking earlier, and one of my favorite ways to cook sweet potatoes in the summertime is to actually put them onto the grill. And folks might think, sweet potatoes on the grill, that doesn't, I've never heard of that before. But if you give them a little bit of olive oil, a nice seasoning, salt, pepper, maybe a little barbecue rub on there, and when you grill them, you get really nice caramelization on the sweet potatoes, and then you can glaze them with the sauce of your choice. I've done a dish in the past where we did a crema that we put some chipotle and a little bit of cilantro into, and then we did some fried onions on top and then fresh herbs, and it was a really beautiful kind of summertime grilled vegetable dish, and the sweet potatoes really sing in a preparation like that. And so we encourage you to get creative with these sweet potatoes. Do a dish with sweet potatoes that maybe you haven't thought of before, and we hope to inspire you today with all of the awesome recipes in the chat, and then with our sweet potato fritters today.
Yeah, I just love that they're, high in fiber, and they're just store so well. And, remember, you want to keep these in a dark, cool place. They don't go in the fridge. So really easy to have them around. Very versatile. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's a great thing to have in the kitchen all year round. Our mixture is made for our fritters. We're just going to set this aside for now, and we'll start talking about the rest of the ingredients that we're going to need today for our hollandaise, and then for our poaching eggs and our spinach. So I'm just going to pop this one off to the side, and then we're going to start getting our recipe ready for our hollandaise. So if folks have never made hollandaise before, the goal today is to debunk that it is a challenging sauce to make. If you make it by hand, it can be a challenging sauce where you're whipping egg yolks with a little bit of lemon juice, and you're trying to make sure that you whip them long enough so they get a little bit fluffy, and then you start to emulsify the butter into there to combine them into this velvety, kind of rich yet acidic sauce that's bright and lovely on top of some poached eggs, lovely on asparagus, really delicious sauce. And doing it in the blender is a foolproof way, and I have not had it fail yet. Knock on wood, we don't have any failures today. And so we have some butter that's melting kind of slowly here on the stove. And when you're working with the hollandaise, we want to make sure our butter is melted, but that it's not super, super ripping hot. If you pour really hot butter onto kind of room temperature egg yolks that have been whipping, there's a chance that we may start to scramble that. And so we don't want our butter to be boiling and be super, super, super hot. We want to let it kind of be hot, but not at the point where we're seeing a ton of bubbles. So I'm going to let this melt, and then as soon as I feel like it's hot enough but not boiling, I'm going to pull it off of the stove. And if you don't know why butter starts to kind of splatter and boil, because butter is not 100% fat. Clarified butter, which we're going to use for frying our little sweet potato fritters today, is a version of butter where we've removed the rest of the moisture, which is milk solids and milk. And so butter, if you ever look at a package of butter at home, you might notice that it says something like 83% butter fat, European-style butter. And what that means is slightly higher fat content, but that means the rest of the butter, that 17%, still contains moisture. And so when we're bringing butter up to a simmer like this, we'll notice that there is sort of like a milky-looking color in the bottom, and that's just residual moisture. And so we don't want to boil that all away because we don't need to use clarified butter for our hollandaise. It's totally fine. But we also don't want to kind of reduce all that out and make our butter too hot. So we'll bring it up to a simmer, and then we'll take it off the heat. Next step is to get some egg yolks. And I want to show you a fun technique today of how I like to remove egg yolks from the whites. And as opposed to doing them one at a time in my hands or using the shell, which a lot of folks will try to use the shell to separate eggs, I like to crack them into a separate bowl and then pull the egg yolks back out. So I'm going to grab my blender just so we can land our egg yolks in here. And we're going to get cracking on our eggs. Another tip I like to give when cracking eggs is that cracking eggs on the side of a bowl can be a pretty challenging way you might end up breaking the yolk. And so I actually like to crack eggs on the table. And so I'll kind of give it a good tap, and then gently open that egg into my bowl right here. Beautiful eggs, really nice golden yolks.
I went through a stage a couple of years ago where I was determined to learn how to crack eggs with one hand. And
how did it go?
I need to get back into that. I was pretty good, but I need to get back into it because it is very handy.
It absolutely is. My first ever cooking job, I was cooking at Fenway Park, the Boston Red Sox baseball stadium in Boston, and we would have to crack hundreds of eggs for brunch service on a weekend. And we would have case races where you would race someone else on a case of eggs and see how fast you could crack it. And you would have to start doing 2 hands because you're going to be working with your egg container in the middle, and you would crack the eggs on the table and then dump them in the container and then put them into compost bins. And it would be a really fun way to see how fast you could do it, but it was also great for me to learn how to crack those eggs with one hand. They weren't always perfect, but it was a fun way to do it, and I hope my record still stands of 5 minutes and 40 seconds for 180 eggs. So,
I mean, that's pretty impressive. I love that.
We would always take on different challengers, and one time I beat the chef, and I was very proud that I could crack a case of eggs faster than he could. So, all right, our eggs are in our little bowl here, and now I'll show you the process of how I like to remove those egg yolks and get them into our food processor or blender. And if you don't have a food processor or blender, this can totally be made with a whisk and a bowl. I just want to show you a little bit of an easier way to do it today. So I'm going to take my hand, and I'm going to go in, and I'm going to try to scoop up that egg yolk. And if you notice what happens, the whites tend to fall away. Then I'm just going to transfer this egg yolk between my 2 hands, kind of making sure I get the rest of the egg white off. And boom, right there, a beautiful egg yolk ready to go. Easy to separate, and we're not worried about the sharp shell kind of cutting into our yolk and breaking it when we put it in the bowl. So same thing with the next one. And then I use my fingers. Sometimes I'll use my thumb and try to pinch off those little extra pieces of white if they don't want to fall off of our egg. And there we go, another yolk. Beautiful. And these are some pretty small eggs, and so in the recipe we're calling for 3, but I'm going to go 4 because these yolks are a little bit on the small side. And then last one. And you see how easily they separate. It's a really great way if you have to do any dish that has more than 2 eggs in there. I think it's a really nice way to separate egg yolks is to crack them into a separate dish. I'm going to give my hands a quick wash so I get these eggs off, and we'll continue with our hollandaise. All right, so now we have some egg whites. Save those for another project. They can be for a different breakfast or for a different dish. Can also be used for cocktails. Always save your egg whites. I think it's a really a shame when they end up going down the drain. Tons of protein. Always good to save. We're going to put them off to the side.
And one of the things I think people don't think about is they're really easy to freeze. They freeze super well.
The whites?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. If you accumulate enough of them, then you can make a proper dish out of them. And if you only have 4 at a time, put them in the container, freeze them. You can add to it for a while until you have enough to make a whole dish out of the egg whites. I like doing egg white scrambles in the morning. I think it's a nice way for using your yolks for something else, just not wasting such a nice product.
I love an angel food cake. I'm a sucker.
For what?
An angel food cake.
Oh.
So good.
Definitely requires whipping some
It's a lot of egg whites.
All right, so we've got our eggs in our little blender here, and then I'm going to grab my knife, and we're going to cut a lemon in half and do some lemon juice in our hollandaise sauce. Now, when you're thinking of something that has butter and eggs, it's pretty heavy, and so we want to add some nice acid into there, and so today we're going to start with half the lemon, and then we'll see if we need to add the rest of it. And so I'll use my little squeezer here, squeeze half a lemon in there. And then the ever-important step, we must season this. So we want to add a good pinch of salt. We're going to start with about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, just maybe 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon. And then we can always add a little bit more at the end, but I don't want to over-season this now. And just one note about the butter that we're going to use. I always use unsalted butter for this dish, because if you're using salted butter, it's a pretty salty it's a pretty salty situation. And so if you're adding that into egg yolks and lemon juice, you might end up with something that's a little bit over-seasoned. And so when making hollandaise, I always like to use unsalted butter. Generally in my cooking at home, I'm always using unsalted butter, but especially for this recipe, it's a key. We're going to set this little guy off to the side just for a few minutes while we wait for this butter to continue melting. And then we'll start getting it together and making our hollandaise. When you're making this at home, it's nice that you can use, if you're using a blender, you can get this set up ahead of time, because I don't want to make the hollandaise right now, because I want to make it right before we serve it. When you're working with butter sauces in general, you want to make them a la minute. And so the reason why is that when we make hollandaise, we're emulsifying, which means to combine this fat and liquid. And so when we emulsify the butter into here, this sauce is something you want to serve nice and fresh, because it's not hot and it's not cold. It's really kind of in that warm room temperature category. But once it cools down, the butter ends up solidifying. And so we want to wait a few more minutes to start on this. And so we'll just keep our butter on that low heat and keep our food processor right here, just so we're ready to go when the time comes. We have 2 more steps to get ready, and then we're going to really dive into the cooking. So the next thing we're going to do is think about our eggs for poaching. And I want to show you a technique today that's really cool. And if you've ever poached eggs before, you've probably noticed that when you put them into a pot, you swirl the water as much as you can, you drop an egg in there, and oftentimes what happens is you get all these whites that kind of run away into the pot. And so what that is a lot of the looser part of the egg whites contains a lot of water, and sometimes when you drop it into your pot of simmering and boiling water, they don't like to all stay together. Sure, you can try a splash of vinegar in there, that's one technique, but I'm gonna show you another way where we're gonna crack the eggs into this little strainer, and we're not gonna strain out the whites by any means, but what we're gonna do is hopefully remove a little bit of that residual moisture, and then this is a really amazing utensil for being able to drop our eggs into the pot in a really gentle manner, as opposed to kind of cracking them to order into the pot. What happens is that force of gravity when you drop the egg is they ending up in the bottom of the pot, and then as they kind of come back up as the pot is boiling, you lose some of the egg white, and they end up looking like these kind of funky ghosts. And so we want to go for some nice rounded eggs for our Eggs Benedict today, and so we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to take these and just crack them into my bowl here, and we'll get a little bit of that moisture out of these eggs and keep those egg whites intact for poaching. So again, you notice I crack them on the table. I am not a fan of cracking on the side of the bowl. And we're gonna do, yeah, we'll poach 6 just to be safe, to make sure we have enough for our dish today.
Yeah, I had learned an interesting thing, which is that eggs really have 3 parts. They have the yolk, the tight white, and the loose white. So you're just like straining off that loose white. So
that's exactly what's happening here right now, is that when I lift this up, you'll notice that there's a little bit of loose white coming out of here. So there's not a ton of egg in the bottom of this bowl yet, but there's definitely, you know, a good amount that will come out as we let these sit for, you know, the next 5 minutes. And so letting them sit in the strainer, 5 minutes should be totally fine. And then we'll use that and drop it right into our pot. So I'm gonna set these just up here as we think about our next steps. So in the spirit of having kind of everything ready to go beforehand, I just want to bring to your attention a couple other tools I have. I have a nice big slotted spoon here. This one will be used for our spinach that we're going to be doing some poaching here. And then I have a smaller spoon, this little slotted spoon, that this one will be perfect for taking those eggs out of our poaching liquid before we go on to our sweet potato fritters. So we've got all of this ready to go. I am going to now start forming our sweet potato patties and think about getting these onto our little pan right here. So I'm going to turn our pan on. We're going to go with a medium-high heat. And we'll start getting that pan hot while we think about making our patties.
Have you ever done a chipotle hollandaise?
Oh, chipotle hollandaise, absolutely delicious.
It's
and
my
so that brings up a really great point. And hollandaise is really kind of ready to be adjusted with whatever you want to add into it. And so there's many variations on this classic French sauce. There is the addition of a little bit of a vinegar and tarragon reduction with shallots to make this a béarnaise. That's amazing with steak. Delicious kind of across the board on grilled meats. And then there's many different fun versions of it, but one of my favorite is the Maltaise sauce. You actually put blood orange zest and juice in there, and it makes a pink hollandaise that is absolutely gorgeous with a piece of fish. It's really lovely over a piece of salmon, and honestly would probably work in a dish like this. We're gonna keep it classic and show you just the traditional hollandaise recipe today, but it's really a canvas for kind of whatever you wanna put in there. Do you have some herbs in the garden that you wanna make an herbed hollandaise? Take some chives, take some basil, take some tarragon, add that into there. It's gonna give a really nice pop of herbaceousness. And so think of this as a canvas that you can play with and add different flavors into, whether it be, you know, chipotles out of a can or anything else. So if you have any fun hollandaise recipes that you've made before, please add them in the chat. We want to hear about it. So our pan is starting to heat up here, and I'm going to go and add in some clarified butter, also known as ghee, into our pan. And the reason that I want to kind of sear these and fry these in some clarified butter is just what we talked about before, that we don't have any of those milk solids or any of the liquid there, and so we're not going to have any sort of popping in the pan, and it will help it stick less when we use a clarified butter just like this. You can buy lovely jars of ghee at the grocery store, or you can clarify butter at home by keeping it over a low heat for, you know, somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes and making sure that you're getting all of that liquid to evaporate out of that butter, leaving you just the pure clarified butter, which is then pure fat. So I'm going to take a couple tablespoons here and get these into our pan, and we're going to get ready to start to sear our sweet potato fritters. While they're searing, we'll start working on our spinach. We're going to finish up our hollandaise, and then we're going to go ahead and plate our whole dish. So clarified butter is melting. We're just going to give that another minute, and then we'll start forming our sweet potato patties and getting them into our pan once that butter has kind of melted all of the way. Another tool I have here is a little fish spatula. This is super nice for turning and flipping our patties. You could also use a plastic spatula, but just my preference is a lovely little fish spatula like this one. And we're ready to start pattying these up. So I'm gonna take a spoon just so I can kind of get a little bit of an eye measurement here. Using a larger spoon like this is nice because then I can pop these into my hand and just give it a slight pattying before we start crisping them in the pan. And when I'm making little patties out of these, I try to make sure that none of my sort of edges of the sweet potato we don't have too many loose flyers off to the side. This way they stay kind of all in one piece, and so I'm using my fingers and my palm to kind of form them just like that, and I feel really good about that shape. And so let's get it into the pan and press it down just a little bit, and we'll start searing it in that clarified butter. We'll repeat that same process a few times here to get enough little sweet potato fritters to match our eggs. Another way you can do this is to make a little bit of a ball in your hand to start, and then start to press it down. And that way, kind of all of those loose edges stay within, and we can pop that right in the pan. Smells really good already. That butter smells fantastic and is gonna make these incredibly delicious little fritters. So same thing, make that little ball. I'm gonna press it down. And we don't want to flatten these into, we want them probably about a ½ an inch thick. I think this is a really nice thickness for these sweet potato cakes where they'll stay nice and creamy in the middle and nice and crispy on the outside. And so adding these to the pan one at a time. You want to work pretty quickly when you're doing this because you want them to cook evenly. And so if you were to really take your time and have some that were ready to flip already, they're going to cook unevenly. And so I want to try to work pretty fast and get my 6 sweet potato fritters into the pan. All right, 2 more to go here. And I'm noticing that as I have let my sweet potato mixture sit for a little bit longer, the salt has helped drawn out a little bit more moisture from these sweet potatoes and the onion. And so now it feels like it's a really great texture where it's gonna remain nice, creamy on the inside and then nice and crisp on the outside. So last little bit here, make our final fritter.
And somebody was asking about if you had time, is this something you could make in advance?
So that's a great question and a lovely, a great idea. And so because these sweet potatoes will not oxidize like a normal potato, this offers us the opportunity to make this ahead of time. If you've ever worked with potatoes that brown very quickly, they oxidize. And so using a sweet potato, it's the flavor profile, in my opinion, is much better and more nutritious. And also, you can make it ahead of time, put it in the fridge the night before, and do this the next day. This is also a recipe that you could make in double. You could put it in a small container and then freeze it and have it for another time. So this recipe, you can make it once and then eat it twice, which is one of my favorite things to do. Just gonna give my hands a quick wash to get the eggs off. All right, so we've got our little sweet potato fritters starting to crisp up in the pan here. They're looking very good. I'm gonna turn my stove up just a tiny bit so we get a little bit of a harder sear going. And then if you remember earlier, we talked about seasoning, where we season that inside with the ½ teaspoon of salt. We're gonna do just a little bit more now and season them on the outside as they're cooking, making sure that we have that salt all the way through. Awesome, that looks and smells amazing. With that sage kind of caramelizing with those sweet potatoes and the onions in the pan, it's starting to smell really good in here. Let's get back to our pot of water here. We're gonna turn this back up to a boil, and we're gonna get our spinach poached off. So this might seem like an insane amount of spinach for making 6 little patties, but if you've ever cooked spinach before at home, you know that this will cook down into a very small amount of spinach. So we're gonna take our lid off right here, and we're gonna get our spinach in here and cook it for just about 30 seconds. And in this water, I do have a good pinch of salt, a good few pinches of salt to make sure that we're seasoning the spinach kind of as we go. Then I'm gonna take my big slotted spoon here, just go in and start cooking that spinach down. And this really takes all of 15 to 20 seconds. So I already see that the spinach is starting to wilt. I'm gonna pull it out. I've got another little colander here, and I'm just gonna get my spinach into there so we can drain the rest of that liquid out and not have it become, very wet on top of our sweet potato fritters. So working in kind of, as much as you can get on your slotted spoon at a time, and then transferring to either a colander or somewhere where you can make sure you're getting all the rest of that liquid out. and then we'll give this a good squeeze and a good press as well. We're going to use the same pot to poach our eggs today, and so do a little bit of a 2-for-1. And so I do want to make sure I get all of my spinach out, and then we'll bring this pot back up to a simmer before we think about poaching our eggs. So just a few more pieces of spinach that are loose in here. And then we're going to season the spinach up, a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt, make sure it tastes nice to go on our fritters. This is, again, a good lesson in seasoning where we have a little bit of salt in this water to poach off the spinach, but then we're going to taste it and make sure that we feel good about how it tastes, because we have really one chance, to season the spinach, and that is right now before we put it onto our Benedict. So I'm using the same spoon, and I'm just kind of taking the back of it and pressing it down onto my spinach. And I'm going to show you how much water has come out of the spinach. This is a good, almost a cup of water in here. Like, this is a lot of water that's come out of the spinach. And so we'll let that just sit for just a couple seconds while we go back over to our sweet potato fritters and take a look and see how they are progressing. So I'm going to take my spatula. I'm just going to go underneath each one just to make sure they're not sticking. And it seems like they are getting good color. I don't want to flip them yet because I really just want to flip them once. And so we want to let them cook kind of all the way on one side before thinking about flipping them onto the other side. But you can move them around in the pan just a little bit, make sure they're not sticking. Use that spatula to kind of unglue them from the bottom if you're having an issue. This is a pretty heavy bottom skillet, and so I like using something like this to get a really nice crust and a really nice sear on top of our little sweet potato fritters. We're gonna give them like maybe 20 more seconds, and then I'll take a look and see what's happening kind of under the hood there. While that's going, we're gonna think about doing our hollandaise. So we have our warm butter, we have our eggs in the blender, and we're gonna start kind of blending these eggs with the lemon juice and the salt, and we're gonna wait and kind of see for the texture of the eggs to change ever so slightly. So right now, when we start, we notice it's kind of watery, the color is fairly yellow, but as we whip air into these egg whites, which is the goal here, is we wanna make them like nice and fluffy before we think about putting any butter into this blender. And so if you notice, the color is slightly changing as we incorporate that air. It started as that beautiful kind of dark yellow like these egg yolks were, and now it's becoming slightly more of like a yellow to whitish color as we whip air into there. So I wanna check these and see how we're doing on our sweet potato fritters. I'm gonna give one of these a flip, and we'll see. Oh, nice. That one's a little bit, not quite golden brown enough for me, so I'm gonna flip it back over. But let's check this one because it's in the back of the pan. That looks awesome. And so what we're looking for is golden brown and delicious. This one right here feels perfect. It's got that nice golden color. I love the way it looks. Let's check the middle one, as this is the hot spot in the pan. That looks gorgeous. Really nice crust, really nice caramelization.
And while you're doing that, somebody was asking about baking the fritters as opposed to frying them. Any suggestions you might have for that?
That's a great question. I think that, if you want to do sort of a more health conscious version of this, you could use just like barely a splash of olive oil and still sear them in the pan. I think baking them would dry them out faster than it would caramelize them. And so if you're okay with adding a little bit of oil or a little bit of butter, I would say you could do less than what I did here. We don't have to fry them quite so deep in the butter. And baking certainly could be a last resort, but I do worry that they would dry out before you really got too much color on them, as a little bit of fat, whether it's olive oil, safflower oil, avocado oil, or butter, just something to really get a little bit of crisp on there.
And I was just going to share a little bit more about ghee. For folks, butter has that moisture. It has those milk proteins and the fat. So the reason we're using ghee for this is not just so that it doesn't pop, but also because if you're just heating up butter and cooking with it for a long time, eventually those milk solids, it gets hot enough that those milk solids burn. So if you do that purposefully or not, don't take it all the way to burn. That's what brown butter is. But the burning makes it bitter. So using that ghee gets that butter flavor without the risk of the black.
Absolutely, because we've removed sort of all of those milk solids and just saved the nice butter that's left over. This butter will brown slightly in the pan, but like Samantha said, we're not worried about having like burnt butter flavor. Because if you've had brown butter, it's incredibly delicious, but then there's burned butter, which is not delicious. And there's a fine line between the two. So we are feeling good about how these are searing. I'm just gonna let them continue to sear there while we talk about making our hollandaise. So I have that butter ready to go. I'm gonna grab just a little pitcher and a little pitcher of water as well, because if this gets too thick, we're going to want to thin it out with just a pinch of water. So I'm going to turn my stove up here just for about 10 seconds just to make sure that that butter is warm enough to start making our hollandaise, and then we'll talk about putting our eggs in there as soon as we get our hollandaise working. So I'm seeing some little bubbles start here, and I'm going to take my butter and I'm going to put it in my pitcher, and we're going to start emulsifying this into our eggs. So I'm going to work on low speed here and make sure that I just do a few little drops of butter at a time to start. So I'm going to keep my food processor on. This food processor is nice because it has a little bit of a hole on the top here that you can pour butter or oil to make a dressing in through. So low speed, and I'm just going to start with small amounts of butter at a time. The nice thing about this food processor is that because the hole is small, it almost controls the flow for you. And if you notice, the color is starting to change a little bit into a lighter color. And so I'm just going to do about half the butter, and then I'm going to stop, and I want to show you what's happening inside the blender. So open it up and just take a quick look. So now we have this kind of thicker yellow sauce that's going on here, but we're not yet at the point where this is like the thickness that we're looking for our hollandaise, which is this nice kind of coats the back of a spoon and isn't so thin. So we want to keep working on it, keep adding in butter here, but first we just need to flip our other sweet potato fritters. We don't want to take them too far, don't want to get them burned, so keeping them at this nice golden brown, gorgeous. These look awesome. Flatten them down just a little bit, make sure we get that crisp going on the other side. And then one more pinch of salt, because we didn't season this side yet. Let's just give another little pinch of salt right there, and we'll keep going. Before we finish up the hollandaise, our eggs are going to take around 2 minutes to poach, so we're going to get them into the liquid and get them to start poaching. So earlier, we removed those loose whites there. We're left with just our less loose egg whites. And I'm going to take this whole thing, and we're going to drop all of this into the pot, but first I'm going to give it just a good spin. And so I'll take my same big spoon I was using before, and I'm going to make a little bit of a vortex. We're going to make an egg poaching vortex here. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to get really close to the liquid and just drop them in one at a time right into our liquid. Look at that. It's awesome. And we're going to put the lid on. I'm going to turn the stove off. And we're just going to let those sit for about 2 minutes and poach while we finish up our hollandaise and finish up searing our little sweet potato fritters here. All right, back to the hollandaise. Got the other half of the butter here. We're going to go back on that low speed, and I'm going to drizzle the rest of this in. All right, let the last bit of the butter kind of flow through. And notice now the color has really changed to be this kind of like light yellow, as opposed to that really, kind of bright yellow of the egg yolks. Now we're at a sort of a more muted tone here, but that means we have built a really beautiful emulsified hollandaise. So I'm gonna just remove the blade here because I wanna show you with a spoon really what this looks like and what the texture that we're looking to achieve with hollandaise is. And so I'm just gonna grab a spoon and show you once we remove this guy off of here. So this is the texture I'm looking for my hollandaise. Is really something that is coating my spoon fully and then not so thick that it is, gummy at all, but a really nice kind of in-between thick and thin texture. And if you feel the temperature of this, it is warm. It's not hot, it's not cold. It's really kind of in that middle category of warm. But this is a beautiful looking hollandaise, and we're just gonna give this a taste and see if we think this needs any more salt or lemon juice. Wow, okay, it's delicious. So that half the lemon was perfect, and just that good, maybe half teaspoon of salt, really seasoned it up nicely. It has a lovely balance in the mouth where it's like tangy from the lemon juice and slightly acidic, and then the richness from the egg yolks and the butter kind of balanced out with that lemon, make a truly perfect sauce. Our fritters are looking awesome. I'm gonna turn these off, and we're gonna think about starting to get ready to plate. Last one we want to check out is our spinach. Remember, we wanted to season this before we add it onto our dish. And so what we'll do is just give a quick taste. Tastes good, could be better. And so what we're going to do is take salt, give a good seasoning of salt, and then I'm going to give it a nice drizzle of olive oil. I think this is a really kind of nice way to just make the spinach feel a little bit fancier, a little more delicious. Take a fork, kind of mix it all up. And do you remember how much spinach this was at the beginning? Now we're left with just this little bowl. That's it. Such a small amount. But it should be perfect for our six little Benedicts that we're making today. All right, we're mixed up on the spinach. Let's give it a taste. Very good. Really nice seasoning. Great to have that olive oil on there.
So, Chef Nico, I feel like if you have, worked in some restaurants, and Benedicts are such a popular brunch thing at restaurants. And so I'd love to hear, I think some people are a little intimidated by the multitasking of how we're doing it right now. What are some ways that we could have things a little more prepared in advance or one at a time and kind of, hot hold it or keep things good so that maybe not everything has to happen all at once?
It's a great question. I think these sweet potato fritters, because we've now got really good color on them, you could do this ahead of time and put your oven on warm. Put your oven on 200 degrees or something like that. Put your pan right into the oven, and they're just going to stay warm while you're able to focus on the other projects. Same thing with the spinach. This can definitely be done ahead of time, and if you're okay with having the spinach more of just like a room temperature, addition onto there, do it ahead of time with your fritters, and then set that aside so you can really focus on your egg poaching. And then there's one more tip that I will always love to share about poaching eggs, and if folks out there are familiar with an immersion circulator, this is basically it creates a water bath at a specific temperature. You can poach eggs inside of the shell if you poach them with an immersion circulator at 135 degrees for about an hour. And it's a really nice way to kind of create a poached egg that you don't have to worry about putting in a pot of water. If you happen to have that kitchen tool at home, give it a try. In restaurants, when we would make large batches of poached eggs for brunch service, we would always pre-poach them ahead of time and then just warm them back up in a water bath and then crack the egg. And it works really, really well. Definitely slightly more advanced technique, but if you have that tool at home and you have that technology, give it a try with eggs. It's a great way to poach a ton of eggs ahead of time. And if poaching eggs is not your jam, you can do this dish with a fried egg. Make a sunny side up batch of eggs in a pan and then use those on top of this dish. That would work totally fine. Poached eggs are not everyone's favorite. Some people really like a little bit of caramelization on their eggs with a fried egg. And so the egg can really be cooked how you like to eat eggs. You don't have to poach them like I'm doing today. Speaking of eggs, we're going to check out our eggs. I'm going to take my spoon and check it out. Look at these beautiful poached eggs. So because we did we got those loose whites off of our poached eggs, what we're left with now is a really beautiful, just like rounded, perfectly poached egg right here. I'm poking that yolk just to feel how is it cooked all the way. And so now we have our egg poached to the point where we want to leave the yolks a little bit runny, because I love cracking into a Eggs Benedict and having the really, really nice runny center on the yolk, but cooked enough that it's not raw. So just going through my pot here, making sure I get all of my eggs out. And I'm putting them into a little bowl here, and this is so I don't get all of the water that sometimes gets stuck along the edges of the egg. I don't want to get all of that onto my dish. All right. Got our eggs here, got our spinach, got our hollandaise. Let's get ready to plate 4 of these beautiful little fritters. So we got our plate, and we're going to start assembling this dish. We're going to put 4 of these onto our plate right here. And then the next step is we're going to take our spinach, and we're going to make a little well with our spinach. And what I mean by that is that we want to kind of push the spinach to the edge and leave a nice spot in the middle where our egg can nest. It's going to sit right on the inside of this. So I move that spinach just to the edges and leave a nice little well in the middle. And this is a little project here that I think is just easier to use hands for, especially when you're just taking those individual leaves of spinach and making that nice kind of landing zone for your eggs. And then we're going to take a spoon and get each of these eggs onto our beautiful sweet potato fritters. All right, we got our 4 poached eggs on there and ready to go. Let's top this with some hollandaise sauce, and then we're just going to do a quick chop of some chives and garnish, and then we're tasting it. So our sauce has that really great consistency, and it's still, still warm enough to serve. And so we're going to take it, we're going to spoon that all over the top. Look at that. That is gorgeous. All over the top of our poached eggs. Just like your favorite brunch restaurant does, you can do it at home. Oh, you want it to coat the egg and coat everything. 1 big tablespoon per Benedict is pretty perfect. And then you can always have a little sauce on the side if you need a little bit more. And then I'm just going to take some chives here and just do a quick chop and garnish with some chives. Totally optional, but just a really nice garnish and something that's super pretty. So a quick little slice on some chives. Let's get those right onto our dish. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to eat this. This is gorgeous. Check that out. Beautiful. Sweet potato eggs Benedict, a little bit of poached spinach, lovely eggs, and a gorgeous hollandaise sauce on top. Let's get in there and try this thing. Little fork and a knife. How'd we do on the poached eggs? Let's take a look. Oh, we cut into that poached egg. We notice it is perfectly runny on the inside. That's how I love to eat my poached eggs. Not raw, but a little bit of cooked yolk, but then having that nice runniness. I'm gonna cut it in half and give a good bite here and see how we feel about this. The sweet potato fritters, that sage really comes through. You get the caramelized from the onion. But really, the flavor of the sweet potato is what's singing here. This is such a better version of this dish. English muffin is out, sweet potato is in. This is an excellent way to eat a Benedict. That little bit of spinach in there is absolutely amazing. And the crispy little bits on the seared side of those sweet potato fritters are excellent. That's delicious.
Just seems like a great way to eat sweet potatoes. And I love that sweet potatoes are such a nice balance of like carbs, but also fiber. It's just so great for you. And like it tastes delicious and it's also nutritious. Nice to have.
And this will keep you full for longer. If you have these complex carbohydrates and protein in your breakfast, complex carbohydrates from our sweet potatoes, protein from our eggs, a little bit of greenery with that spinach, and a lovely sauce on top. This is a recipe for being fueled all day. Sweet potatoes are really great, pre-workout, post-workout. They're an really amazing thing to have in the kitchen all the time. How do we do with our giveaway? Do we have a winner?
Doing great. I've got a winner.
Who is it?
The winner of our sweet potato goodie bag is Katie Tremaine. So if you can DM me your email address, we'll get you connected up with that. So send me just a direct message.
Katie, congratulations. We'll be sending these off to you. Excited for you to get some sweet potato swag. Thank you so much for joining us today, folks. Our next class is going to be on Tuesday with me at 11 a.m. Pacific time. We are doing an Elvis-inspired bread pudding. Think peanut butter, bacon. We'll have to see you then. I'll reveal the rest when we teach that class. Thank you for joining us, as always. All of our classes are available on demand. Thank you to North Carolina Sweet Potatoes. So happy to be working with this product. Gorgeous dish. Can't wait for you to make it at home. We'll see you next time. Good one.